Hello and welcome to the ILO's Future of Work podcast. I'm Sophie Fisher. Today our guest is Wagner Moura, the Brazilian actor, director, filmmaker, musician and journalist. Wagner is probably best known for his role in the TV series Narcos, where he played the drug dealer Pablo Escobar. However, there's another side to Wagner's work. He is a dedicated advocate for workers' rights, in particular against forced labour and child labour. Wagner, welcome to the ILO's Future of Work podcast.
Sure.
I know you grew up in a rural part of Brazil. Could you describe a little what it was like? Did you ever see examples of forced labour or child labour when you yourself were a child?
Yeah, many times. I grew up in a very poor area in the northeast of Brazil. It was a little city called Rodelas in the state of Bahia, and I grew up witnessing like what for me back then it were normal things because that's how things were.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, I wasn't well equipped yet to understand what that was, but I witnessed like rural workers working for food only, or for shelter, or for no payment involved. A very brutal thing that I saw back then was young girls, like 12 kids, actually 12, 13, 15-year-old young girls going to work in the houses of people that have a little bit, listen, and I'm not talking about wealthy people, right? There were no wealthy people there, but like the ones who had a little more money could hire a really, really poor girl to work in their houses, and this girl would like basically do all domestic work in the house by the age of 12, 11, 13. No money, no payment, no wages. She never got paid. It was actually a very weird thing because we used to see those the people that were hiring these girls as someone that were giving them some opportunity so she can eat, she can have a place to sleep. Sometimes they even allowed them to go to school. And another thing that happened with those girls is that they sometimes were used to initiate sexually the little boys in the family. And I, as a kid, was kind of seeing this, and there was something in me that was like, this is not right. But all the environment, that was never an issue, with the community, with the leaders, with the mayors, with the little institutions in that city. It was all normal. So when I grew up, I kind of really started to see that was fucked up. And then that's when especially because the rural workers, the guys that were working in the agriculture field, I'd seen that a lot because my uncles, I had family that were sort of hiring these guys to work, and some of these guys were like really friendly. And this is the tragic thing that I learned about slave labor. The victim, they rarely know their condition.
So you're saying that people stuck in forced labour don't always realise it?
I mean, they don't know that they're slave laborers. And that for me was the most tragic thing, because sometimes working with in Brazil with the rescuers, the forces that were labor ministry that were like going to these places and freeing these people from what was going on with them, many times I've seen the workers getting really pissed, as if those people were coming there to take their jobs. I imagine that emotionally is very embarrassing and humiliating to realize that you are in a condition of being a person that's being explored by another human being. So when I grew up, I started to realize all these things, and that really moved me because that was sort of a background that I had. that I have lived, and to work with human rights movements, especially towards slave labor, this labor issue.
You've talked about seeing forced labour, but did you know any of the people who were involved personally? For example, on your uncle's farm, did you talk to the workers?
Yeah, I talked to them. They were not like, listen, I've never seen these guys like dressing the victim, but that wasn't okay, because as soon as the season, the harvest ended, they were like, okay, goodbye. And they didn't have a place to sleep anymore, or a place to, it was like no money. That was all gone. When these people are rescued, once I met, I was already working with the ILO, and I met 3 or 4 guys that were rescued. We spoke, and that's when I realized that the conscience that they got after the rescue, and like, oh my god, that had different effects on them. A lot of shame, many of them, there was like really painful, and to see that they were like victims of that thing. And some of them, it was more like, okay, from now on, I'm going to make sure this is not going to happen to other people. But it's a very difficult emotional position to be put in.
So you saw all these examples when you were young, but when did you decide to become involved in ending forced labour? Was there a specific moment that changed your mind, or was it a slower process?
It was a slow cooked thing. Basically, I think that education is the basis for any sort of social and personal change. Coming from a poor place, where my level of education, the kind of schools that I was going to, was like the same schools that everybody was going to. Mm-hmm. So at some point, with public schools in the northeast of Brazil, like very like bad. You were like in a classroom, and then a goat would get in the classroom, So it was. But when my father decided that we needed to move to Salvador, which is the capital of the state, because he was a sergeant of the Air Force. So all the money, we were poor, but all the money that he had, he used to give myself and my sister a sort of a proper education. Realizing that studying history, when you kind of have a perspective of the past, and so all that made me go, fuck, I was living in a horrible sort of toxic and cruel environment. And so that's when I decided to join human rights movements, and eventually work with the ILO.
You mentioned that you didn't fully understand the problems you saw when you were a child because it was just normal life for you and for the other people around you. Do you think there are still major misconceptions about child labour today? And if so, what are they?
Many parents, like of a generation, like my parents' generation, for example, they see work as a very, very important thing, especially when you're poor. So they might listen, my dad grew up working as a kid. So working as a kid with your family till today is not seen as a bad thing. And I get it, I get, this is sort of the culture of some places. And, as far as the kids still go to school, I'm even fine with that, help your parents and do what you have to do. It's poor people, they need help. I get it. But it's so that sort of mentality spreads up to like, oh, kids are good to work. There's no problem in having kids working, and that's when exploitation comes. Also, it's profitable. That kind of despicable things that you see in the world, like in wars, and that's that happens because there is a market for that kind of thing, and we could say that it's in a bigger way. It is one of another horrible side effect of capitalism.
We all know that forced labour is a complex problem. Thinking for a moment about our listeners on this podcast, Is there anything that they can do as ordinary people? Do you have any tips or advice for how they can help or get involved?
I'm going to say something that's not completely connected to the subject we're talking about here, which is slave labor and all that. I think in general, we are living in a moment where there's a lot of discredit on politics. There's in my opinion, a very dangerous movement that make people believe that politics are bad, that politicians are bad. If you start to believe that the democratic institutions have no value, they're not important, that politics are all dirty, and it's a very dangerous path to take us to a place where we are not far away from, which is a big disruption in the democratic what we understand nowadays as democracy. Otherwise, we're going to start to see like polarized countries, with people only getting informations from their own groups and their own bubbles and all that. That scares me. I think that we have to answer your question. I think that our way, in a broader way, is like we have to believe that politics is important. And when I say politics, that it's in our daily lives. This is politics. Our conversation here, it's politics. It's small things. Bring awareness to something. Discuss something. Talk about something. I think that this is. This is the thing that's concerning me more nowadays. The how we don't care much about anything. Everything seems so dirty and so bad. It's COVID. It's the war in Ukraine, and it's like, and so instead of making us like apart, it should be a means for us to really dive in and do something about it in whatever field you work. Which is like, I'm a popular actor in Brazil, especially, so I try to bring awareness to, if people listen to me, I better say something that matters. But there are so many different fields that you can just don't think that you don't have a responsibility, or you don't have you do. I mean, if you see something that doesn't feel right, find your way to say something about it.
So you think we all need to engage a little more with these kinds of issues?
I mean, it seems a little naive, but that's how I see it. Like, engage politically. It's not a bad thing. It's not an ugly thing. It can be, but if you there is a line that I never know if it's from Brecht, that he says, the bad thing about the ones who don't like politics is that they are governed by the ones that love it. Engage. Yeah.
And one final question. Do you think of yourself now as an activist?
I think so. I mean, in a way, because I think that there are other people there that give their lives to that. That's not my case. It's that's a very important thing in my life, but that doesn't define who I am. As actually nothing really does. I'm an actor, I'm a director, but I'm a human being I'm concerned about social issues. I have empathy for other people. I came from a very poor place, so that's part of me, and I can't just ignore what things that I've seen, and so, I'm an activist in a way, but I'm not a professional activist.
Wagner Moura, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. And thanks to you, our audience, for listening. If you'd like to learn more about forced labour or child labour around the world, or what needs to be done to end it, you'll find lots of information on the ILO website. That's www.ilo.org/forced labour. So that's it for now. Please join us again soon for another Future of Work podcast. And until then, goodbye.